Welcome to Sandwich Seniority. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Robbie Haig, and we're talking today with someone hopefully that you all really do know. It's Bill Keating, who is a U.S. Representative for Massachusetts' 10th Congressional District. From 1999 to 2011, he was District Attorney of Norfolk County. He is a member of the Democratic Party and a former Massachusetts State Representative and State Senator. Welcome, Congressman Keating.
Robbie, thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you here.
And it's great for you to stop by our opening of our new district office in Plymouth. Thank you for doing that, too.
Yes, and your new district office is on Court Street.
It's on 2 Court Street.
In the heart of Plymouth.
It is, and it's something that, listening to people over the last year, there's times you want to have face-to-face meetings with staff and people to assist you, because just by the nature of whatever your need might be. And there was an office in Quincy and one in Hyannis, and the people in the whole middle part of the district said, it's not that convenient for me to go to either place, so would you ever consider having an office there? And a lot of people shared that same view.
Sure. It's quite a distance between the two.
And it was difficult in these budgetary times because our own budget has been cut 11%.
Wow.
So we were able to, move our budget around, sort of cut back in other areas and have this actually become a reality. But I think it's a good investment of the money because people did feel that, they were really left out in that whole portion of the Plymouth County portion.
Sure. And of course, there's been a little bit of a shakeup in where your
the district is.
The district,
yes.
Thank you.
We went from, because of the census that occurred across the country, Massachusetts wasn't growing the population as quickly as other portions of the country, like Texas, for instance, that gained so many seats. So we lost a seat because of the House redistricting. We went from 10 congressional seats to 9. So all the seats expanded. They're just under almost 750,000 people in a district now. So all the districts got much larger. The district that I am in is one where the change wasn't as great in terms of the voters. 75% of the voters in the current district are still voters in the new district. Oh. So even though changes occurred across the Commonwealth, this was one that, in terms of the voters I represent, wasn't the largest change. But it was a significant change.
And it made it a little more feasible for you to come down the Cape Cod area then.
It did. This is interesting, Robbie. There's a point in your life where sometimes people think decisions of office will make you change your own personal life. This is the other way around. My wife and myself, we were looking to retire about 20 years ago. We're thinking way ahead, and we wanted to retire in this region. And we saw a home in Monument Beach, part of Bourne, village of Bourne, that we liked, and we purchased it around 18 years ago. And it was part of the old Gardner estate, with Isabella Stewart Gardner and that family. Yes,
absolutely.
The Gardners also built the railroad, where the train goes through.
Really?
Cape Cod too. So it was that family, and they had a series of homes, and this was the guest home portion of it, and it was over 100 years old when we bought it, and we were excited about the view and where it was. And
it chose you.
And it did. That's what happens. You go in and make a decision like that. So little did I know then, or even have a clue, that would end up being right in the dead center of this new district geographically. So that's good luck, I guess.
That's good luck. How interesting.
And so we were able to take our decision that we were going to wait and postpone until more of a retirement age, and accelerate that to say, let's do it now.
Very good.
And so we were happy with that, and it's.
Well, you've been in politics for a long time.
I have.
Have you ever done anything else?
I have.
You have?
Good question.
Okay.
I always worked. I remember when I was 15, I hope I didn't break any laws doing it, but I was a dishwasher and pot washer through the summers, and I'd been a short order cook through the summers, trying to save up money for college. And when I was accepted at Boston College, I was able to work in the post office during that period, and I paid for my entire undergraduate and later on the beginnings of my master's in business degree by working my way through. So I've been very lucky to have that opportunity. By today's standards, young people, number one, it's hard to get a job like that.
Right.
And number two, it couldn't come close to what the tuition is now.
Absolutely.
So
Right.
I had those jobs in the post office. Then I ventured out and at the age of 23 decided to run for state representative, which was kind of an intimidating decision at that time, but I did it.
Whatever gave you the idea to do that at 23?
Really, it was having an internship from Boston College in the State House, and I became very interested in it. And that's why I'm always trying to make room for interns today in my office, because that really sparked, my interest in it in a more fundamental sense. And I said, I'll give it a try. And the biggest issue at that time was my age. They said I was too young to be a state representative. And so I hope I have the good sense to get out of office before, at the other end of the spectrum, they say age is an issue again. But I was
it's
able
the culmination of everything you've learned in between those two ages.
right.
They won't let you go.
I was able to go to law school, and I did have my own business, a law business, when I was in the state senate. So those are some of the jobs I've had in my career, and it's been helpful. I'm very fortunate to be a person that had the opportunities and chances to do things, and that's what I dedicate myself to in Congress now, because what we have as a country is one, we're the country where a chance and opportunities, not a handout, but the chance to do something if you work hard and play by the rules. And those are issues in Congress today.
Well, what was the big change in going from Massachusetts to D.C.?
Well, the magnitude of it, I really think. I was I was chair of 5 different committees when I was in the legislature, so I knew how legislative groups work. I know that there's a lot of crossover between the Massachusetts rules and the federal rules, but there were changes in the rules I had to learn. But that was the easier part. The breadth of what I had to deal with, and then being away on average 40 weeks a year, 4 days a week in Washington is a commitment. And I don't know how some of the people do it with young children.
Right.
But some of the people do. But that's a big change, 40 weeks a year, 4 days a week.
A long time.
And then the issues. One of the committees I'm on is the subcommittee on the Mideast. And can you imagine with all the changes right now that have occurred, doing that, being able to go to Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan and Kuwait, visiting our soldiers, talking to the generals. General Petraeus was there at the time. General Allen is there now. Talking to the officials in Pakistan with the tense relationships we have now.
Sure.
Learning, seeing at that time last year the mobilization to get us out of Iraq occur.
Right.
So it's and having a better understanding of on the ground just what's going on. I was just, it opens up the world to you. And then in the Small Business Committee, I've been able to work helping businesses grow and trying, especially those small, innovative businesses, get off the ground. And I'm a ranking member on the Homeland Security Subcommittee that deals with oversight of Homeland Security, so that 3 committees is a rarity. So the schedule is unbelievable, the hours you put in.
I can only imagine.
And then getting back in the district and just having a few days, but wanting to just tour all those businesses, see what's going on, see how we can create more jobs, and listening to people.
Well, speaking of Homeland Security, I just a month ago had the opportunity to be in Yuma, Arizona, and I witnessed firsthand what Homeland Security was doing. It really made me feel very good. To see the trucks on the border between Arizona and Mexico. We read about this in the newspaper, but when you see it, I'm sure it's like you being there, it has a total different meaning.
It does. In that border issue, the drug cartels that are in Mexico are creating a violent situation. But our country has been working with the government of Mexico to make things better, safer.
Yes.
But there's still real challenges
But
that exist there. But that's been something that we've spent a great deal of time looking at. And you're right, when you see things in person.
It's amazing.
When I was in Afghanistan, I had a chance to see the whole CENTCOM command, where the anti-terrorist, all the anti-terrorist efforts are housed. And you had CIA and FBI and all the armed services working together. And it makes you really not only proud, but it makes you understand how good the U.S. is at dealing with these issues.
Yes.
And that's important going forward, because we cannot engage economically and with the loss of young people in these nation-building efforts. Iraq, I don't believe we should have ever been in Iraq. In Afghanistan, I think the scope of it grew too large too quickly. But in the future, we still have a real threat of terrorists around the world, and homegrown terrorists here in our own country. And we have to remain vigilant about that. But when I ever saw how sophisticated they were, how they worked together, the work they were doing, it's really inspiring to see. And the young men and women that are soldiers are just the finest young people that you'd ever, not all of them young either in this particular war. But what a good feeling it gives you in our country. I had one instance, unfortunately, where we were in a helicopter going into the southern part of Afghanistan, and they asked us to go see if we could go to a fallen comrade ceremony. And when I got there, everything grew very silent. Went off of the helicopter, and then realized there were all soldiers all lined up. And a van came in and brought a casket of a fallen soldier that was just killed just hours before in the battlefield. And it was a very moving ceremony where, I noticed there was a young man about the age of my own son. And then you begin thinking about...
That puts it in perspective,
It does, your
doesn't
own
it?
birth of your son and all those memories. And I was thinking that airplane was going to take that young person back home to their family. And you're right, I mean, there's so many experiences that you have. Instead of reading about things in the paper, you really experience yourself, and it does make an enormous difference. And
well, tell me, does your family go with you to Washington, D.C. for the 40 weeks?
Not for the 40 weeks. My wife does come down. She always says, I'll go to the good events, the ones that...
Actually, I was wondering if you established a residence down there.
No, we have, even though my children, one daughter is already graduated and starting work, and my son is still a junior. And that happens all too fast, doesn't it? It does, in Philadelphia. And we do have 4 dependents, 4 animals at our house, 2 dogs and 2 cats.
Oh, you're an animal family too.
Yes, we are.
Very good.
And unfortunately, 2 of them are vintage pets in age, and sometimes, it's almost like an assisted living for our animals, but, they are part of the family.
They are, and sometimes they direct what you do on a daily basis too.
And that's, that does interrupt the trips back and forth to Washington for my wife.
But that's
a good reason.
That's a good thing, right. Talk to me about how deeply you feel about environmental protection.
Well, when I was in the legislature, I received Legislator of the Year award by the Environmental Lobby of Massachusetts, because I put in, among other things, legislation to stop the commercial selling through products of phosphates that, as you know, get into the groundwater and then pollute, choke off our ponds and rivers. So I've had a long-standing view of that. Now, to have a district like this that's so coastal and beautiful, all the way from the South Shore through the Cape and Islands and to the South Coast now, is a real responsibility as well, because we have a very fragile environment in that way. And in Cape Cod in particular, there's a sole source aquifer for the whole Cape. So we have to be very careful in that regard. And part of the battles we've fought were regulations, and protections that were put into place. Now, some of them have great significance, and others should be eliminated. One of the first things we did to help business, there was a requirement to keep track and report $600 on down of all your expenditures that you did with vendors, and that would take small businesses and just flood them in paperwork. So we did away with that. But when it comes to some of the environmental protections, we have to be very careful what we're doing, because it becomes very expensive to go back and correct the things if you make the wrong decision.
Sure.
And groundwater monitoring in our region that's so coastal is critical. And in other parts of the country, the air quality could be a more important matter as well.
Right.
So we have to make sure those protections are there for us.
But truly, in Plymouth alone, there are 365 ponds.
It's unbelievable. I mean,
if they were disrupted,
I know.
I mean,
it would.
That would be terrible.
It would, and we would pay. Sometimes these decisions are pay a little now or pay more later.
Right.
And so if we can stop the introduction of pollutants in, it's a lot cheaper than trying to do something. Even there are instances when you can't later on, the damage is too great.
Right.
And that will help the United States. I've looked at what's occurring in other countries like China with their explosion of industry. Well, they're not keeping any protections of any significance on the environment there and what some of the pollutants are. And it's beginning to cost them.
Wow.
And that's going to be one of the things that will level the playing field going forward, because they just cannot keep doing what they're doing.
And there are so many of them.
That's right. So I think we're wise. We're looking at things in a thoughtful way. But when it comes to the environment in this whole district, I mean, Plymouth is going to be celebrating in a few years the big anniversary.
Right.
And, you want to make sure that, you're putting your best face forward in all of these things, because that's going to be critical. Because tourism is such a huge, huge industry in this district because of the coast and even some of the other historical landmarks that are there. And if you're not, if that's tarnished, your business goes up. And we're enjoying in our new office space in Plymouth, just being about a block away from the ocean too.
Right.
So besides the ponds,
you're in the midst.
It's really,
That's a good thing.
There's a lot of history, but there's a lot of beauty.
Yes, there is. What is your feeling on the windmills that are happening on the Cape?
Well, the offshore wind, Cape wind, I support. It's moving forward slowly.
Right.
I do, and ironically, it's going to create business in New Bedford where they're planning on doing the staging, and it will take away some of the need for fossil fuels as well. The land-based wind turbines, again, I believe that the local communities should have their own controls over that, just like they would for any other business coming in.
Yes.
And that's where some of the controversy comes into play.
Right.
They should be able, at the local level, to say, this isn't a good area, or this is, just the way they do through zoning of any other business.
Sure.
And if that's done and people are in agreement, then that's great. But I think moving something like that into an existing residential area creates problems.
I think they still are a lot more attractive than the telephone poles.
And there are energy issues. I don't know how many people here remember. I bet you do, and I certainly do. Staying in line for half an hour to 45 minutes to get 5 gallons of gasoline.
Absolutely.
I don't think young people quite understand what we're talking about, but
and odd even days.
yes, with your license plate.
Absolutely.
And how it affected people that depended on their car for business back and forth.
Right.
So we have to we didn't learn our lesson then. We have to become more and more energy independent, and we are, but we can do more in this country.
And cars used to be a luxury, but they are not anymore.
No, and they're making cars with 40 miles a gallon now, and that's going to be the future. And they're making good cars that do that. And we're exporting those cars to other countries because, again, this country does make cars well. And we had our problems for a while, but we're back on the right track as a world leader. But there can be that kind of change. There could be changes to very different types of energy sources. And there's more that can be done every day in technology. There was a company I visited where, the covering that's on, buildings, just the shade from the ultraviolet light.
Yes.
They put tiny, tiny little lines of photovoltaic cells in that, and it works like a grid and produces its own electricity. Now that is being manufactured right here in this region. So as you look at what we can do in the future, and they're using that kind of technology on greenhouses for small farms and growth. And
isn't that amazing?
So there's so much ahead of us that we'll be able to do. And I think we've learned there's not one solution. There's not one silver bullet. It's got to be done in so many different ways. But I'm encouraged that if we continue that investment, it'll help us. It'll help us, not just our environment, but there's no way we're going to compete on an equal footing with other countries if we are so dependent on gas and oil. And in my work in the Mideast and in Homeland Security too, I realized that there's a national security issue. We cannot be so dependent on other forms of energy and keep our country secure at the same time. So there's a real need, an imperative to go forward in this. And I am glad to see a lot of discussion and a lot of innovation occur in that regard.
Right. And when we can hold in the palm of our hand an iPad that connects us to the rest of the world, there's no limit to what we can do.
No, and that's reshaped businesses too.
Sure.
Because these small businesses that used to just have a little regional market, now they have a global market because of that. And I think you're going to see that change, boom our economy as well. That's where the future of the economy is going to go, into those small, innovative businesses where there's ideas that create economic expansion and wealth, and they can do it right from their own, either residence if they have to, or a small business, because the world is opened up to them.
Excellent. I would like to make mention of the fact, this is on the other side of the topics, that you founded a women's advisory board.
Yes.
We did that. District.
We did that to, when I was a district attorney, we used to do things particularly for younger people, younger women. And we would have a professional women's to lunch program where sometimes professional women would go to lunch with a middle school or high school girl and sit down and talk about their professional experience. Oftentimes they didn't end up going to that. It was more comfortable for the students to just go into the high school or small groups and do that. But I think it's important that people realize that, because there still are some roadblocks that are there economically to women. And some of them occur because in our culture or some of our upbringings, we don't think we can do it. So a woman might not be sitting there saying, well, I'm going to start my own business, or I'm going to engage in this. We even had, when I passed a law when I was in the legislature, allowing more opportunities to women in the construction business.
Oh,
and that passed, and there were more women in construction, good paying jobs.
Very good.
So
and
the
why
whole idea,
cannot a woman drive a truck?
Of course they can. I mean, we have women that I saw securing our country in overseas and doing a great job. And we just don't want people to feel that they can't do anything. When I go into the schools as much as I can, and especially even with the younger students, I'll say, what are your dreams? And invariably 2 or 3 of them would say, I want to be president of the United States, I want to do this. And I said, please don't let anyone talk you out of your dream.
Wonderful.
Because that's what happens to too many young people.
Right.
I mean, I gave my example at my young age when I was first running. So many people said, well, you can't do that, you're too young. And there's too much in our society of age discrimination where people say, they use the excuse, you can't do that because you're too old.
Yes.
When they're looking at maybe health costs or other things they're not supposed to into law be looking at. But on both ends of the spectrum, you cannot limit people, and people's dreams should be there. And part of what we've done with the Women's Advisory Board is to open up that kind of discussion so that people would understand and have role models they can look at in so many different professions and so many different ways of life. And it's exciting that way.
Sure.
I know that when I was, it sounds hard to believe, but I was very young, 5 or 6 years old, and I was watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I remember,
Yes.
when I was a young child, and it was on TV. And I remember going to my father afterwards and saying, "Do you think I could do that someday?" And he said, "Sure you can. You can do that. Anything you want, you could do that."
Anything you want.
And it actually ended up happening. But I wonder,
If you
at
can
a young
think
age,
it, you can accomplish it.
and that's what we want to do.
Right. That's fantastic. And speaking of too old to, dealing with seniors, seniors are no longer old people.
Right.
Numbers don't mean a thing. More of the seniors are as viable as the younger people.
And in Congress, I'm about the mean age of members of
Sure.
Congress. And it's in part because I think, young people with families, it's much of a burden. But also, it's not easy to get to that level. It's not easy to be, have world experience. And because of that, it's an amazing collection. One of the other things I've enjoyed, so many of the people you work with have stories and life
Right.
stories
Yes.
that you wouldn't believe
Right.
existed. John Lewis, who I served with from Georgia, he spoke. He was one of the speakers at Martin Luther King's March on Washington
Okay.
at that age, in the 60s. And now he's a member of Congress. And a wonderful, he just won the national, I hope I get the term right, Medal of Honor the president
Wow.
gave out to certain people. Bill Russell, the Celtics
Oh,
star,
yes.
was one of those as well, not just because of athletics, but other things he did.
Very good.
But you have those people, and you're right.
And they're diverse.
And the energy there's a lot of physical energy getting around that way, going back and forth through your districts, and not every district's as close as mine is, with the
Sure.
plane ride. So I've met so many amazing people, vibrant, active, and they can wear you down just watching everything they do.
And that's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, we haven't touched on nearly a good portion of what I wanted to talk to you about, but because of time constraints, I'm afraid you're going to have to come back and
we
talk
will.
with us again.
I'd like that, Robbie, very
It's
much.
been wonderful.
I think it's important to do that. Part of the job, it's called a representative. You can't represent unless you're engaging in a dialogue. And when I come back, when we're back in our area, I just really have done, I think, put a priority on doing that. Because people want to know what's going on. But when you have opportunities like this with cable television to do that, I look forward to it, and I'll be glad to do that again if you'll have me.
I'll have to find you on one of your other 15 weeks when you're here.
There you go. I'll be glad to do that.
Thank
That's
you
a promise.
very, very much
Well,
for
thanks,
being
Robbie.
here.
I appreciate that.
And thank you for being here with us. And we hope to see you again real soon for Sandwich Seniority. This is your host, Robbie Haig. Good night.